Well, there's climate risk and there's climate risk. The standard projections that the IPCC have had since the very beginning, 1990, are clear. There's going to be warming, there's sea level rise, changes in extremes, as the recent IPCC report made clear, and this is something that countries will need to be aware of and prepare to. Then if the IEA projections are indeed materializing and we go way beyond 2 degrees, then the risk will become irreversible, and one would have to start thinking about melting of the Greenland ice sheet, for example, that leads to a sea level rise of way beyond 5-6 meters. And then the question really isn't just one of where the small island states and countries like Bangladesh and other megadeltas are going to find the resources to adapt, then even the best prepared countries like the Netherlands are going to be in difficulty.
And I guess the Netherlands will be fine because they've got a lot of money, but it's other countries around the world who perhaps don't have that necessary finance to adapt.
That's correct. Even though the Netherlands might have the knowledge and the expertise and know-how and infrastructure to deal with a sea level rise of, say, 0.5 meter to 1 meter. If you have an irreversible sea level rise that goes beyond that, it will be very difficult, even for the Netherlands, to see what could be done. And this isn't just a matter of either being rich or poor. We saw, for example, in Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina, that even in the best prepared countries and the rich countries like the United States, people are vulnerable.
And do you see, looking at your focuses on climate risk, is there enough focus on adaptation? Is it taken seriously enough?
It is now. It took a long time, considering that adaptation is mentioned in the UNFCCC that was agreed in 1992. It really took maybe 10, 15 years for it to be squarely on the agenda. The Bali Action Plan that was agreed in 2007 put sort of equal weight on adaptation and mitigation, and now indeed adaptation finance and adaptation planning is high on the agenda of the COP. But it's taken a long time. And one could ask, how much time have we actually wasted by the false assumption that by focusing on adaptation we would distract from mitigation? It's not an either-or question. Both are needed.
What areas of the world, with regards to adaptation, are you particularly concerned about?
Well, the IPCC has made very clear that there are high risks in Africa with small islands, in megadeltas, mountainous areas, so that it's almost like there's no part of the world that is going to be spared. What will make a big difference is the difference in capacity of countries and people to adapt. Although there are limits to that, and that will be an important topic of the 5th assessment report of the IPCC that will come out in 2013, 2014.
And a lot of that capacity will come from funding, will come from finance. That's part of your focus in these 2 weeks. How do you see those finance funding negotiations playing out? We've obviously, this has been taking place under the cloud of the Eurozone crisis and a global sort of slowdown. How do you see those finance discussions playing out?
Well, I think one of the major outcomes of Cancun last year was the agreement on the Green Climate Fund. The Transitional Committee has worked very hard in the past year to design an instrument that would make the fund operational, and there was a big disappointment in Cape Town last month when there was no consensus about the design of the Green Climate Fund, and the question these 2 weeks is what's going to happen next. Are the negotiations going to be reopened, or are Saudi Arabia and the United States, who are the 2 countries that withhold their agreement, are going to agree after having second thoughts, which is going to be very important, not just for the fund to exist, but also to give countries confidence that the money will indeed be spent wisely and that there is a transparent accountability system for them.
And with regard to the USA, Todd Stern's been on record as saying he thinks developing countries should also contribute to the Green Climate Fund. Is that how you see it? We've obviously got some countries, non-Annex 1 countries, exceptionally rich countries now, perhaps not per capita, but they've got huge GDPs. Do you think that this should be, the funding for the Green Climate Fund should be shared equitably around the world, developing or non-developing?
Well, there is a key principle of the UNFCCC is common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. And what the more advanced developing countries could provide, not only in terms of finance but also in terms of emission reductions and so on, is an issue of negotiation. I would certainly think that there are non-Annex 1 countries, developing countries that are more advanced, that could make contributions, but it's obviously not up to me, that's up to the negotiations.
Okay, final question. Put a figure on what could be a financially suitable settlement at the end of these 2 weeks in terms of the Green Climate Fund or other financial sort of funds that are being discussed?
Well, these 2 weeks aren't actually negotiating the numbers. The numbers have already been agreed on last year in Cancun. And
you don't see that changing in the next 2 weeks, though?
I would be surprised if there would be a reopening of those negotiations. They've agreed on the 100 billion figure, $100 billion per year by 2020. It's going to be very difficult, but there's also been a report of the advisory group to Ban Ki-moon last year that showed that while it's difficult, it's not impossible to raise that amount of money.